It started with a name that dripped with power and prestige: Clark Rockefeller, a man supposedly born into one of America's most elite dynasties, wealthy, sophisticated, with a taste for the arts, and an air of exclusivity. People didn't just want to know him, they felt lucky to even be in his presence. And yet, beneath the bespoke suits and blue blood charm was a truth so bizarre it felt like a movie plot, because Clark Rockefeller didn't exist. The man behind the name was Christian Gerhartsreiter, a German immigrant with no money, no connections, and no legal right to be in the United States. And over the span of 3 decades, he transformed himself from an ordinary foreign exchange student into a con man capable of infiltrating the highest social circles in America, all while hiding a past tied to fraud, manipulation, and even murder. But to understand how this imposter pulled it off for so long, you have to start in a small town in Bavaria, West Germany, in 1961. That's where Christian Karl Gerhartsreiter was born. The son of a house painter and a seamstress, his childhood was unremarkable. No trust funds, no yachts, no summers in the Hamptons. He was an average boy with above-average dreams, or rather, delusions. From a young age, he was obsessed with American pop culture, elite society, and stories of the ultra-wealthy. To Christian, life wasn't about who you were, it was about who people thought you were. In 1978, when he was just 17, he found his way to the United States on a student visa, attending high school in Connecticut through an exchange program. But instead of returning home after his studies, he overstayed his visa and vanished from the radar, a move that would mark the first of many lies he'd tell to survive. He reinvented himself over and over, cycling through aliases. One of his earliest cons involved posing as Christopher Chichester, a supposed British aristocrat claiming to be the 13th Baronet of Chichester. He moved into a wealthy neighborhood in San Marino, California, and rented a guest house from a woman named Ruth Dido Sohas. To the locals, Christopher seemed eccentric but harmless. He spoke with a fake accent, dropped vague references to royal connections, and drove a flashy car. But when Ruth's son, John Sohas, and his wife Linda mysteriously disappeared in 1985, questions began to swirl. Neighbors recalled seeing construction work on the property shortly before the couple vanished. Christopher told people John and Linda had gone to work for the government, a claim no one could verify. Soon after, he himself disappeared, abandoning the guest house and leaving behind a trail of unpaid bills. Years later, in 1994, workers digging in the backyard would uncover human remains, identified as John Sohas. His wife Linda was never found. At the time, Christian, still posing under various names, was long gone, and no one connected him to the murder. From there, he migrated across the country, upgrading his scams. In New York, he appeared as Christopher Crowe, a wealthy TV producer, supposedly working on the set of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He mingled with Wall Street brokers, even securing a position at a brokerage firm despite having no real financial credentials. He dressed expensively, spoke confidently, and manipulated his way into professional circles with ease. But when questions about his background began to mount, like why his social security number belonged to a recently deceased boy from Washington State, he vanished again. It was around the mid-1990s when Christian staged his most audacious transformation yet. He adopted the name Clark Rockefeller, claiming to be a reclusive member of the Rockefeller family, one of the richest in America. The real Rockefellers were known for their wealth, philanthropy, and discretion, so it wasn't entirely unusual for someone with the name to be private. Still, Christian spun elaborate tales that he was an heir, an art collector, a financial consultant for the ultra-wealthy. With this identity, he embedded himself into high society in Boston. He attended exclusive events, joined elite clubs, and cultivated a relationship with a successful businesswoman named Sandra Boss. Sandra, a Harvard MBA and partner at McKinsey & Company, was drawn to his charm and intellect. In 1995, the two married in a Quaker ceremony. Sandra believed she was marrying into one of America's most prominent families. For years, Clark lived in luxury without a job, relying entirely on Sandra's multi-million-dollar income. He refused to let her visit his supposed family estate and avoided situations that might require him to show a legitimate ID. His paranoia about being kidnapped for ransom seemed eccentric, but, in hindsight, was a clever way to hide his true lack of background. Their marriage eventually crumbled in 2007, with Sandra citing controlling behavior and secrecy. During their divorce, Clark was granted limited visitation with their daughter, Ray. But in July 2008, during a supervised visit in Boston, he staged a dramatic kidnapping, shoving the social worker who was monitoring the meeting into his SUV, speeding away and vanishing with Ray. The FBI launched a nationwide manhunt. For 6 days, Clark Rockefeller and his daughter were missing. Authorities tracked him to Baltimore, where he was living under yet another alias, Chip Smith, and posing as a ship's captain. He was arrested without incident, and Ree was returned safely to Sandra. It was during his arrest that investigators uncovered his true identity: Christian Gerhartsreiter, the German exchange student who had been living in the U.S. illegally for 3 decades. His web of lies unraveled. Old acquaintances recognized him from his Christopher Chichester days, and investigators linked him to the disappearance of John and Linda Sohus. In 2013, Christian was convicted of the 1985 murder of John Sohus and sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. He maintained his innocence, claiming he had nothing to do with John's death. But prosecutors pointed to circumstantial evidence, the guest house connection, witness accounts, and the fact that he disappeared immediately after the couple vanished. Linda's body has never been found. The Clark Rockefeller case fascinated the public not just because of the murder, but because of how long Christian sustained his deception. He was a master manipulator, exploiting social cues, wealth dynamics, and the fact that people are often too polite or too intimidated to question the wealthy. He played roles so convincingly that even those closest to him didn't realize they were interacting with a fabrication. Looking back, the signs were always there: the vague answers, the changing accents, the reluctance to provide details. But Christian thrived on one universal truth: people want to believe a good story, especially if it flatters them. If someone says they're part of a world you've only dreamed about, it's tempting to accept them at face value. From a small Bavarian village to the elite halls of Boston society, Christian Gerhartsreiter lived multiple lives, leaving a trail of lies, stolen identities, and tragedy. In the end, his final act wasn't the murder conviction, it was the shattering of an illusion. For decades, he convinced the world he was Clark Rockefeller. But once the truth came out, he was just a man named Christian, sitting in a prison cell, no longer able to outrun his past.